We operate under a highly intuitive assumption about our own minds, that conscious awareness is the unified executive driver of our actions. We feel like the author sitting behind our eyes, taking in sensory data, making decisions, and then directing the body to act. Clinical neurology proves this intuition is backwards. Proof of this is a condition called blindsight. This occurs when a patient suffers damage to V1, the primary visual cortex at the back of the brain. This creates a scotoma, a conscious blind spot in their visual field. To the patient, that area of their vision is pitch black, but the eye itself is still capturing light. That raw data bypasses the damaged V1 region entirely, traveling through subcortical pathways deep in the brain directly to the extrastriate cortex, an area that handles higher-level visual processing. If an experimenter forces a blindsight patient to guess the orientation of a line presented inside their blind spot, asking whether it is vertical or horizontal, they will often answer correctly. They do this while emphatically claiming they see absolutely nothing. This tells us that while activity in the extrastriate cortex is necessary for awareness, it is not sufficient to create it. The brain can successfully evaluate a target and execute a physical response entirely in the dark, without any conscious input. If blindsight shows us that awareness goes missing during a physical action, split-brain patients show us what happens when awareness is divided into isolated compartments. To treat severe epilepsy, surgeons will sometimes sever the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is the thick bundle of nerve fibers that directly connects the left and right hemispheres of the brain. Cutting it means the two halves can no longer communicate. If a researcher flashes the written command "laugh" to the left visual field, the anatomy of the optic nerve routes that information exclusively to the right hemisphere. The isolated right hemisphere has enough rudimentary language comprehension to understand the instruction. It generates the motor command, and the patient laughs out loud. But the left hemisphere, which houses the brain's superior language skills, never saw the word. It is entirely ignorant of the instruction. When asked why they laughed, the left hemisphere is caught off guard. Instead of admitting ignorance, it instantly fabricates a logical, plausible excuse. The patient will say something like, "You guys come up with the funniest tests," genuinely believing that is the reason they laughed. The left hemisphere watches the body act and then invents a narrative to explain it. Conscious awareness operates more like a retroactive public relations manager than the original author of our actions. This creates an immediate paradox. If conscious awareness isn't the primary driver of our behavior, what exactly is the brain doing when we stop focusing on external tasks? For decades, neuroscientists assumed that when a person sat quietly in a room, their brain went into a resting, idle state. But early functional neuroimaging studies revealed the exact opposite. Researchers discovered the default mode network, or DMN. The DMN is a specific network of interacting brain regions that activates when a person is not focused on the outside world. Its central hub is the posterior cingulate cortex, or PCC, a midline structure deep in the brain. Rather than idling, the PCC consumes a massive amount of metabolic energy when a patient is sitting quietly in the scanner doing absolutely nothing. This chart shows the fMRI signals of two separate neural systems over time. The warm colors track the default mode network, while the cool colors track the dorsal frontal parietal attentional network, which handles active focus. The lines are directly anti-correlated. When activity in one network goes up, the other goes down. Look at the exact second a cognitive task begins. The attentional network spikes immediately to process the external problem, while the default mode network plummets. To allocate resources to an external stimulus, the brain actively suppresses the DMN. It forces the posterior cingulate cortex to shut down its internal focus on autobiographical memory and self-representation, so you can pay attention to the world in front of you. Cognitive rest is an illusion. The moments you are staring blankly out a window, your brain is engaging a highly structured, computationally expensive background state that is vital to its overall architecture. We know the brain runs intense calculations when we are detached from the environment. But how does that internal state translate into physical action? Do we consciously initiate the decision to move? In 1984, neurophysiologist Benjamin Libet set up a series of EEG experiments to measure the precise timing of voluntary action. He asked subjects to look at a highly precise clock and note the exact moment they felt the conscious urge to move their hand. Libet was looking for the readiness potential. The readiness potential is a measurable elevation in electrical activity generated by the premotor cortex that reliably precedes a physical movement. This is a timeline chart illustrating Libet's findings. The horizontal axis represents time, leading up to the physical movement at 0, while the vertical axis represents the amplitude of neural activity. Here is the exact millisecond the subject consciously reported feeling the urge to move their hand. But the electrical signal of the readiness potential begins its upward ramp well before that marker. The premotor cortex begins preparing for the action up to 300 milliseconds before the conscious urge even exists. Modern fMRI studies using more sophisticated tracking have pushed this timeline much further. They show that complex choices can be predicted by underlying brain activity seconds in advance of the subject becoming aware of their own decision. The professional implications of this data force a strict reevaluation of agency. Consciousness operates as a delayed passive observer. At best, it acts as a late-stage veto mechanism, allowing us to cancel an action right before execution. It is not the prime mover. This brings us back to the massive energy consumption of the default mode network. If the posterior cingulate cortex is suppressed during simple laboratory tasks, what complex cognitive operations is it running behind the scenes? Outside the laboratory, animals face the ecological problem of complex decision-making. Every single choice you make in a dynamic environment alters the range of options available to you in the future. This creates a constant trade-off between two strategies: exploitation and exploration. Exploitation is choosing a known, safe reward based on your past experience. Exploration is risking a low-value or unknown option to gather new information and update your internal map of the world. To evaluate how the brain manages this calculus, researchers use a 4-arm bandit task. Monkeys choose between 4 targets on a screen, each providing a random, fluctuating amount of juice. The monkey has to constantly decide whether to exploit the best-known target or explore the others to see if their payouts have improved. This graph tracks a single neuron's firing rate inside the posterior cingulate cortex. During predictable exploit choices, neural activity stays at a low baseline. But when the monkey switches to an explore decision, the firing rate spikes massively, persisting long after the reward is delivered. The PCC actively tracks environmental randomness. It retrieves memories of past payouts, monitors current errors, and computes the mathematical threshold for when to abandon a safe strategy for a risky one. And it manages all of this without conscious input. The architecture of human agency is built from the bottom up. The brain does not sit idle waiting to react to the present. Instead, it operates a continuous, metabolically expensive background simulation through the default mode network. This network retrieves autobiographical memories, projects those experiences into simulated futures, and calculates the risk of interacting with a changing environment entirely below the threshold of awareness. Our behavioral strategies are dictated by this internal calculus, not by a unified executive self sitting at the top of the chain. The voice we hear in our heads and the conscious decisions we feel we are making are simply the final, delayed outputs of a mathematical engine running in the dark.